Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever spoken to a woman and felt like something invisible was missing? You were polite, you were kind, you asked questions, you smiled, and yet the spark didn't catch, the connection didn't land. You walked away feeling unseen, like your words dissolved before they could ever reach her. I want you to pause there, because that space, that confusing silence between what you said and what she felt, is where today's story begins. You see how a man speaks to a woman isn't just about charm or confidence. It's about presence, it's about resonance, it's about saying words that touch something deeper than logic, something primal, emotional, and exquisitely human. High-value men don't talk at women. They speak with a quiet current of power and understanding that makes her feel safe, seen, and stirred all at once. And women, they don't always remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. In this video, we're not going to give you tricks, no manipulation, no gimmicks, just real connection, authentic communication, and the subtle, magnetic language of men who know their worth and how to speak like it. So stay with me, because once you learn how to speak like a high-value man, women won't just listen to you, they'll feel you. Have you ever been on a date, or even just a conversation with a woman where you were saying all the right things, compliments, attentive questions, even a good joke or two, but halfway through, you started to sense something drifting, like the emotional temperature had dropped and you didn't know why? You were doing everything you thought a gentleman should do, and yet, her smile wasn't quite reaching her eyes. You could feel it, and in that moment, maybe you started trying harder, talking faster, laughing louder, reaching for just the right sentence to pull her back in. But nothing worked. If you felt that, you're not alone. In fact, I would say that moment, the moment when a man begins to doubt the weight of his own presence, is one of the most deeply frustrating experiences for men who genuinely care about connection. Because this isn't about pick-up lines, this isn't about image. This is about something much deeper. It's about how you show up in your words. It's about the masculine energy that lives underneath your voice. Not your tone, but your intention. When a woman listens to you, she's not just listening with her ears. She's scanning with her body. She's feeling, sometimes unconsciously, for presence, for depth, for certainty. For a man who knows who he is, who's not looking to be liked, but looking to be known. This is what I call embodied communication. And it's the difference between a man who gets polite attention and a man who holds her gaze without ever having to raise his voice. Let me tell you a secret most men don't realize. When you talk to a woman, she's not only hearing what you say, she's registering who you are beneath the words. And high-value men, they understand this. They don't rush, they don't fill silence with noise. They speak in a way that lets her feel his clarity before he's even made his point. So let's talk about that. Let's start at the very beginning with the first shift, speaking with grounded presence. You see, so many men fall into the trap of trying to impress. They think the right phrase or the perfect story will win her interest. But high-value men, they know the most magnetic thing they can offer a woman is not their wit, it's their calm. Grounded presence means that when you speak, you are fully rooted in the moment. You're not trying to anticipate her reaction. You're not overthinking your next sentence. You are simply here, with her, one breath at a time. And because you're not performing, she relaxes. She drops her guard. Because women respond not to pressure, but to atmosphere. Think of it this way: when you speak from grounded presence, it's like your words come from your spine, not your head. You don't fidget. You don't rush to explain yourself. You're slow, intentional, not boring, intentional. And this is crucial. Grounded presence is not arrogance. It's not cold detachment. It's the opposite. It's when your calm gives her space to feel herself more deeply in your company. Have you ever met someone whose energy made you feel more like yourself? That's what women feel around high-value men. Now, that leads me to the second shift, listening as a form of leadership. Yes, listening. I know you've heard it before. But this is different. This is not passive listening. This is not waiting for your turn to speak. This is listening with ownership. A high-value man listens to a woman not to fix her, not to flatter her, not to decode her, but to truly receive her. And here's the nuance: when you listen well, you don't just reflect back her words, you hold them. You listen not just to what she says, but to what she means beneath it. Let me give you an example. She tells you about a stressful day at work. You don't jump in with advice. You don't start telling her about your stressful week. You pause. You look at her, and maybe you say, "That sounds exhausting. Did you feel like anyone had your back today?" That kind of response shows presence, not performance. You've heard the emotional truth underneath the facts. That's emotional intelligence. And that's where chemistry ignites. Because chemistry isn't born from cleverness. It's born from recognition. From the moment she feels, "He gets me." He sees past the surface. Now here's the third and maybe the most misunderstood pillar of how high-value men speak to women: emotional congruence. This one is subtle but powerful. It means that your words, your tone, and your energy are all aligned. You're not saying something kind with a tight jaw. You're not making a joke when your eyes are quietly sad. Women are master decoders of incongruence. They may not always name it, but they will feel it. If your energy doesn't match your words, she will pull back, not because she's cold or distant, but because her nervous system is simply protecting her. But when you are emotionally congruent, when your words match your inner state, she feels safe. She relaxes into your authenticity. This doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It means you have to be real. If you're nervous, own it. If you're intrigued, let it show. If you feel inspired by her presence, say it. Not dramatically, not theatrically, but honestly. There's nothing more attractive than a man who isn't afraid of his own heart. And women can feel it, not because he's emotional, but because he's available. That's what makes a man unforgettable. Not what he says, but how he feels behind his words. So, if you've ever wondered why some men walk into a room and instantly capture a woman's attention, it's not because of their clothes or their stories or even their looks. It's because of this, their grounded presence, their listening leadership, and their emotional congruence. They make her feel like she can exhale. And in a world that constantly asks women to hold everything together, being the man who makes her breathe again is rare. You don't need louder words, you need deeper alignment. And once you begin speaking from that place, not to impress, but to connect, everything changes. She begins to lean in, she starts to open, she feels something she can't always explain, but doesn't want to let go. Let's keep going. There's a moment, a sacred moment, that happens when a woman begins to trust the rhythm of a man's voice, not because it's smooth or well rehearsed, but because it's honest. And when she leans into that rhythm, it's not the words she's responding to, it's the man behind them, his pace, his patience, his willingness to be present with her story without needing to control it. That's what creates chemistry. That's what makes conversation a dance, not a transaction. And here's where the next shift reveals itself. Playfulness with restraint. It's one of the most intoxicating qualities a man can embody. Think of it as a quiet smirk rather than a loud laugh. It's the difference between a man who needs attention and a man who already has his center and invites her to meet him there with just a glance. Playfulness is not about trying to be funny. It's about being light. It's knowing that seduction is not pressure. It's invitation. And the most high-value men know that flirtation isn't always about compliments or teasing. Sometimes, it's the way you linger in silence, the way you pause between words letting her fill the space, the way you smile, not at her, but because of her. There's a subtle joy that lives in men who don't need to prove themselves, who can be soft in their strength, who can play with a woman not like she's a prize to be won, but like she's already enough. And the game is mutual delight. Women notice that. It's rare, because most men either try too hard or shut down entirely. But high-value men, they hold back just enough to let her imagination join in. They're not in a rush to reach the punchline. They're not desperate to show they're interesting. They know the most magnetic conversations are the ones where both people feel like they're discovering each other moment by moment. And now we step into something even more intimate: curiosity without control. I want you to really feel this, because this is where many good men, kind, respectful men, often lose their power without realizing it. Curiosity without control means that you are interested in her, not to predict her, not to manage her emotions, not to guide the outcome of the conversation, but simply to witness her unfold, without needing to rush her into clarity, without needing to draw conclusions about what she feels, without needing to fix her story. When a man asks questions because he needs to feel safe with her answers, that's control disguised as interest. But when he asks because he truly wants to know what moves her, what frightens her, what inspires her, that's real intimacy, and she feels the difference. You ask her, what lights you up when no one's watching? Or you wonder aloud, what's something about you I'd never guess, but you wish people saw? These aren't textbook questions. These are soulful invitations. They don't trap her, they free her. And when she begins to speak from that deeper place, not the place of answers, but the place of essence, something sacred happens. She doesn't just talk, she reveals. And in that moment, you become the kind of man women never forget, not because you dazzled her with stories, but because you gave her space to hear her own voice in a new way. This is what women mean when they say, he makes me feel safe. It doesn't mean you solved her problems. It means you didn't interrupt her becoming. So let's lean further. There's another layer. A deeper language that most men never learn to speak because no one taught them how to be fluent in it. It's the language of vulnerability without collapse. This one requires courage, because for many men, the word vulnerability has been wrapped in shame. You were told to be strong, controlled, but strength without softness is just tension. It pushes people away, especially women who intuitively long for both power and depth, who want to feel a man's heart, not just his protection. When you share your truth, not the highlight reel, but the moment your heart cracked open, that's when she feels the shape of your soul. And no, this isn't about emotional dumping. This isn't about spilling every insecurity. It's about offering something real without needing her to carry it. You can say, I've had seasons where I felt invisible, where I questioned if I was enough, not for pity, but for honesty. Because that kind of honesty doesn't make you weak, it makes you brave. And she doesn't pity you, she trusts you. Because if you can hold yourself in your own truth, She knows. Instinctively, you will know how to hold her too. Let me give you a moment. Think of the last time you said something real, raw, without apology, without performance. Maybe it was just a sentence. Maybe it was a pause. But it came from the place in you that doesn't wear armor. That's your power, not your job. Not your bank account, not your appearance, your truth. Women don't need you to be perfect, but they long to feel that you are real, that you have touched your own darkness and come back stronger, not colder. So let's connect this to one more essential quality of how high value men speak to women. Life is messy. Conversations get uncomfortable, emotions rise, tensions appear, but high-value men don't react with panic. They don't lash out or shut down, they breathe. Stillness is not silence. It's the choice to stay with the discomfort without fleeing it. When a woman says something emotional, confronting, even painful, you don't need to fix it. You need to remain present. Open, unmoved by the chaos, grounded in your own breath, because that's what makes a woman feel held. She's not looking for you to control her feelings. She wants to know that your presence can withstand her depth, that she can cry or rage or doubt, and you won't flinch. Stillness isn't passive, it's powerful. It says, I'm here. I'm not afraid of your intensity. I can meet you without losing myself. And in that stillness, something extraordinary happens. She begins to soften, to trust, because she senses that you're not here for control. You're here for connection. And when she feels that, when your words are laced with calm, curiosity, and courage, she doesn't just listen. She begins to open, not just to you, but to parts of herself she forgot how to feel. That's the mark of a high-value man. Not that he takes up all the space in the room, but that his words create space for something sacred to unfold. When you speak to a woman from that place, the conversation becomes more than dialogue. It becomes discovery, and the beauty of it is, she doesn't even know why she feels so drawn to you. She just does. Because the parts of her that crave to be seen, to be felt, to be safe, recognize you. And now we arrive at the part that few people talk about. Because it's not flashy, it doesn't get headlines. But it's the quiet rhythm that keeps every meaningful connection alive. It's not what you say at the beginning. It's what you keep saying when the initial spark has softened into silence, into ordinary days, into the truth of being seen beyond the first impression. Consistency without overexposure. A high-value man doesn't speak just to make himself known. He speaks to create continuity. He understands that emotional safety for a woman is not built in grand gestures. It's built in the quiet reassurance that his words align with his actions. That when he says he'll call, he does. That when he opens her up, he doesn't disappear the moment her vulnerability arrives. But here's the subtlety. Consistency doesn't mean flooding her. It doesn't mean explaining your every move or seeking validation at every turn. A high-value man respects her space while making it clear. He's not playing games. He's present. He's stable. He's not showing up today and vanishing tomorrow. This emotional equilibrium is rare, and it makes you unforgettable, because so many women have been conditioned to expect inconsistency, to wait for the other shoe to drop, to carry the weight of maintaining the connection alone. When you show up, not to overwhelm her with attention but to remind her, you're not the only one holding this. You activate something deep in her, a primal sense of being partnered, not just flirted with. Now, let's step deeper into one of the most paradoxical truths of masculine communication, the art of saying less and meaning more. Some of the most powerful things a man can say are the ones that emerge from presence, not pressure. I see you. I admire how you handled that. I've been thinking about what you said. Not long speeches, not poetic declarations, just words that reveal you were there, that you were listening, that you weren't waiting for your turn to impress her, you were letting her impact you. High-value men don't need to dominate the airspace. They don't need to fill every gap. In fact, it's often in the pauses, those sacred moments between words, where she begins to feel the weight of your presence. When you let silence speak, you invite her into intimacy. You say, without saying it, you don't need to perform for me. You can rest here. Women don't want perfect. They want real. And sometimes the most honest thing you can say is nothing. Just look at her. Be with her. Let the moment expand. This is what creates chemistry that doesn't fade after the first few conversations. This is what allows attraction to evolve into depth. And now finally, let's speak about the invisible language that lives in your tone, in your gaze, in the way you leave her feeling after you've gone. A high-value man understands that communication doesn't end when the conversation does. It lingers, it echoes. She remembers how she felt in your presence. Did she feel seen, heard, safe? Did she feel challenged in a way that made her grow? Or did she leave the conversation wondering if she had to shrink to keep your interest? You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have all the answers. But you do need to be aware of the imprint your energy leaves behind. Because that imprint is what keeps her thinking of you long after the words have ended. So many men obsess over what to say in the moment. But the real impact, it's felt in the days after, in how she replays your words, in how she remembers your tone, in how her body relaxes or contracts when she thinks of you. That is your legacy. That is what defines a high-value man, not a single grand statement, but the subtle, steady sense of, this man touched something in me. And that kind of man, he's not common, but he's unforgettable. So if you're watching this and wondering, where do I even begin? I'll tell you, begin where it matters most, with your own presence, with your own breath. Practice slowing down, practice saying less, but meaning more. Practice asking questions not to impress, but to reveal. Practice holding your truth without needing her approval. Because here's the truth, and I want you to feel this deeply. You do not need to become someone else to be magnetic. You do not need to memorize scripts or master techniques. You simply need to uncover the most authentic, grounded, available version of you and speak from there. That's what women feel. That's what draws them in. Not your perfection, but your presence. And remember this, a woman may forget what you wore. She may forget your stories. She may even forget your name for a moment, but she will never forget how she felt in your presence. And when your words come from that place of clarity, of depth, of quiet power, you become the kind of man she doesn't just want to talk to. You become the kind of man she wants to trust. You become the space where she can bring not just her beauty, but her truth. And that is when she begins to love you. Not just for how you look, not even for how you speak, but for how you see her. So as you move forward, don't chase being impressive, chase being impeccably present. The right words will follow, and so will she. If this resonated with you, if something stirred inside as you listened, I'd love to hear from you. What part of this conversation spoke to you the most? Let's meet in the comments. And if you want more of these conversations, these deep dives into love, intimacy, and masculine presence, I invite you to subscribe. Because the journey to becoming a high-value man is not about adding layers. It's about shedding everything that hides your true self. Here's to being seen. Here's to speaking not just to be heard, but to be felt. And here's to becoming the man she remembers long after the words have faded. There's something magnetic about a man who knows how to stay open without spilling, who speaks from his center, not from his wounds. And it's here we begin to enter the emotional mastery of communication, the space where most men struggle not because they are careless, but because no one ever taught them how to speak from strength without sounding distant, and from softness without collapsing into apology. A high-value man knows that the tone of his voice is more important than the content, that how he says something often matters more than what he says. He speaks with intention, not obligation. He doesn't over-explain. He doesn't justify his needs, nor does he tiptoe around hers. He invites, he listens, he responds, not reactively, but responsively, because he has learned the difference between impulse and impact. Have you ever noticed how most arguments, most ruptures in intimacy, are not because someone said something cruel, but because someone said something confused, unclear, misaligned with how they actually feel? Women don't need you to be a poet, but they need you to be coherent. And coherence is what comes when your feelings, your values, and your language are in alignment. Let's look at an example. A woman says, I need more emotional availability from you. A man who hasn't done the inner work might reply, I'm here, aren't I? What more do you want from me? And just like that, the space between them closes not with connection, but with frustration. But a man who's grounded, who speaks from presence, might pause and then say, I hear you. And the truth is, sometimes I don't even know how to give that, because I wasn't raised to express those parts of myself. But I want to try. I want to meet you there. Do you feel the difference? One response guards ego, the other opens possibility. You don't have to be emotionally fluent overnight, but you must be emotionally available to the process of becoming more honest with yourself, so you can be more honest with her. Because a woman can only meet you as deeply as you've met yourself. And when she feels that you're willing to meet her, not from the surface, but from the substance of your own heart, her guard begins to lower, her love begins to deepen. This is not about perfect phrasing. This is about emotional leadership. When you say, let me think about that, and mean it, not as avoidance, but as reflection, that's leadership. When you say, that hurt, and I don't want to blame you, but I want to stay open, that's leadership. When you say, I'm scared too, but I'm not leaving this conversation, that's leadership. Women are not looking for you to fix everything. They are looking for you to feel with them, to stay in the discomfort without numbing it, to be emotionally responsible without being emotionally repressed. That is emotional mastery. That is the power of masculine vulnerability. Not the vulnerability that spills everything, but the kind that says, I'm here, even when it's hard, I won't hide. And in that kind of presence, intimacy thrives. Because when a woman feels that you are anchored, she can be expansive. She doesn't have to filter her emotions to protect your fragility. She doesn't have to censor her passion to preserve your comfort. She can bring her full self, her joy, her rage, her her tears, her desire, and know that your presence won't flinch, because you've become a man who doesn't fear intensity. You've become a man who can stay steady even as emotion rises. You've become the man who turns conversations into containers for real love, not just connection, but expansion. And what you may not realize is how rare that is. So few men speak from this space, not because they're incapable, but because they haven't practiced. And that's all this is. Practice. Practice saying what's true, even if it's clumsy. Practice asking questions that matter, even if you don't know where they'll lead. Practice holding her gaze when she's crying, instead of looking away. Practice silence, not as punishment, but as intimacy. Practice breathing instead of reacting. Practice choosing presence over performance. These are the micro movements of a high-value man. The soft, subtle, soul-centered gestures that tell a woman, you're safe to be here, and I'm not going anywhere. That's the kind of man a woman respects. That's the kind of man a woman trusts, and trust, that's the doorway to everything. So you see, the real art of speaking like a high-value man is not about having perfect lines. It's about having an integrated self. A man whose inner world is not a war zone, but a sanctuary. When you speak from that sanctuary, she doesn't hear just your words. She hears your soul. She hears how deeply you've dared to know yourself, how bravely you've healed the parts of you that once pushed love away. And she leans in, not because you dazzled her, but because you anchored her. This is what you are capable of. And the beauty is, you don't have to build this version of yourself from scratch. He's already there, beneath the noise, beneath the pressure, beneath the years of performance. He's just waiting for your permission to speak. So here we are. We've wandered through the many layers of how high-value men speak, how they speak with presence, with clarity, with grounded emotion. But there is one more truth, one last piece to this mosaic, and it's not something you add to your conversations. It's something you carry with you long after the talking is done. It's integrity in absence. This is the final test of your words, not how they land when you're in front of her, but how they hold when you're gone. What echoes when your voice is no longer in the room? What she still hears when she's alone with her thoughts, replaying not just what you said, but who you were when you said it. A high-value man doesn't speak one way in her presence and another when he's alone. He doesn't offer tenderness only when he wants something. He doesn't withhold silence to punish. His communication isn't transactional. It's transformational. He is consistent, even when no one is watching. And that's what creates safety. Because when your presence and your absence both feel honest, she can relax into trust. You become a man whose word is felt, not just heard, not just remembered, felt. And that's the true legacy of a high-value man's voice. It's not the cleverness of his language. It's the reliability of his essence. A woman will remember the man whose voice matched his soul. And here's what I want to tell you, not as advice, but as a reflection from someone who's seen what intimacy can become when it's spoken with care. You do not need to be loud to be powerful. You do not need to speak perfectly to be heard. You do not need to master scripts or memorize tactics. You need only to return to yourself, to speak from where you know who you are, not just when things are easy, but especially when they're not. Speak not to convince her of your worth, but to express what already lives inside you. Speak with kindness, not to avoid conflict, but because you've made peace with your own history. Speak with curiosity, not to impress, but to understand. Speak with reverence, not because she's fragile, but because what you're building together deserves sacredness. And most of all, speak with honesty, not performative honesty, not filtered, curated, look how vulnerable I am honesty. I mean quiet, grounded, non-negotiable honesty, the kind that says, this is who I am, this is where I stand, and I welcome you to join me, but I do not fear standing here alone. That is the voice of a man who is sovereign. And women, they don't just love that kind of man, they respect him, they trust him, and they follow him, not out of obligation, but because they feel safe enough to let go of control. And what blossoms in that space is devotion. So as we close this conversation, I want to ask you something you may not hear often. Not, what are you going to say to women from now on? But rather, what are you going to say to yourself when no one's listening? What kind of man are you becoming when there's no woman in the room to impress? Because that man is the one she will meet. That man is the one she will either feel at home with or guarded against. So take this moment right now, not to rehearse new lines, but to remember your own voice. And when you do speak, let it be slow. Let it be clear. Let it be something that rises not from fear, not from need, but from truth. Let it be something she remembers, not because it was clever, but because it was real. Let it be the kind of conversation that doesn't ask for applause, doesn't beg to be liked, doesn't shrink to avoid discomfort. Let it be a conversation between equals, where your masculinity doesn't overpower, but holds, honors, reveals. Because when a woman feels the power of your voice, your true voice, not the one you crafted to perform, but the one you uncovered through courage and compassion, she will listen, she will trust, and in time, she may even fall, not because you tricked her, not because you played a role, but because, finally, she found a man who could meet her depth, a man who could hold her chaos, a man whose silence felt safer than another man's praise. That man is you. If you're willing to step into him, if this journey stirred something in you, if you're walking away not just with ideas, but with clarity, I want to thank you, not for listening, but for being open. And if you're ready for more of this, more conversations about love, depth, attraction, communication, and the real inner work of becoming the man she never forgets, then I welcome you to stay close, subscribe, share this video with a friend who's ready to rise. And most of all, speak, but not from noise. Speak from knowing, because the world doesn't need more men who talk to be heard. It needs more men who speak to connect.